I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Good evening, welcome to Conspiracy Cafe. I'm your host, George Freund. We're with you now, we're with you to the end. And we know the end is going to be a long, long time away because we're making changes. We're pushing the New World Order back, little bits and pieces. We make discoveries, we figure things out, we harass them. They have to crawl back into their cave and come up with some new ideas, which are something they have a lot of difficulty doing. And that's why Conspiracy Cafe here at that channel is the one and only point of the sword. There's nothing like it on the planet Earth. Nothing like it at all, as a lot of you regular listeners have found out. They can do whatever they try, but sooner or later, we're coming back into the game and putting them back on the bench to get blisters on their butts, because that's what we do, and we do it very well. A lot of things happening in the world, so many. You know, we could do a daily show here and still have a lot of room left over for more. It just doesn't end, doesn't end, doesn't end. I was teasing some of the people I work with to say, well, you know, if I worked for a big media organization, like say like one of Toronto's big newspapers, I might spend weeks working on one story, just one, and then present that and get paid, or maybe write 2 editorials a week or something like that and make twice what I'm making now. But you know, with this deadline for this show this week, like there's like 5 different things I've got to do all at once and bring it to the plate, because we know there's all kinds of conspiracies behind every one of these things. It's just a matter of digging until you come up with the right answers. And that's where we're very privileged to have some good supporters to this show who really make it tick. There's a lot of girls out there who, you know, do untold amounts of research, share information, pass it along, and there's just no stopping the team. It's just growing and growing and growing. Even before I got here, just mucking around on the internet, and we see the U.S. Coast Guard sank that Japanese trawler that was kind of derelict floating across the Pacific, coming a little bit into American territorial waters off Alaska. A fishing trawler was going to board it and take control of it, but they prevented that from happening. And there's probably a good reason for that, because it's evidence. And like all evidence from all crimes, they destroy it. They take away the steel beams from the World Trade Center and destroy it. They took away the Murrah building from Oklahoma City and they destroyed it. And anyone who gets close to it gets destroyed. Happens all the time. So if they salvage this ship, might they have found other radioactive isotopes on it that would imply what was implied, at least in this forum from the very beginning, was that there were nuclear explosions there that ruptured Fukushima? That they brought in these giant so-called cameras, which were probably really mini nukes, and took the place out. The guy who did all that research is kind of hiding out in Mexico, tells me he pushed the hot button based on the reaction he's getting. I've heard many other forums put up all kinds of material. Nobody gets to the heart of the matter like Mr. Stone did with his analysis of what happened at Fukushima. It was just bang on, methinks. One of the big things we keep harping on is the fact that, you know, our TVs are going to watch us. See, when you come here, you watch me, I don't watch you. I don't know what you're doing at the other end. That's your business. You're in the privacy of your own home or wherever you are watching this show. But Big Brother wants to change things. This is like the setup for the new cameras that are being brought out by Samsung, so that they can have high resolution cameras inside, microphones, speech recognition software, so they can know exactly who's in your house. You're voluntarily wiring your own home for surveillance, so they can listen to everything you say, know what exactly it is you, because they use voice recognition, face recognition. They'll know where you are at all times. You are the herd, the cattle, the chattel of the New World Order, and they want to keep very, very close tabs on their property, and you are their property. This I like just because it was kind of funny. to see this woman between two TV sets with the eyes googling down on her, and she's in between, so they can't look up her skirt or invade her private space. She's smart. Even smarter is to not get these gizmos. It's time to just be a Luddite to some degree and back off, back out of the technology. The technology has been designed to enslave you, not to liberate you. You can go so far, but don't go any further. We use the internet all the time to communicate ideas. It's the Dodge City of cyberspace. But be careful where you go, because here we see they're spying on us. The NSA, Uncle Sam, have this massive program in place to invade your home and watch everything you do. And as we had to amend this little cartoon here, this is reality TV. Reality TV is the TV's watching you, and you're just in an endless matrix of surveillance. The British government is bringing in a bill very similar to the one that's proposed in Canada. They also have similar ones in New Zealand, Australia, the United States, where the government's being given, or taking, I should say. We don't give it to them, they just take it. Rights are taken, they're never given. The reason we had rights at the beginning is because brave people came along and took them. Or you'd never have rights, you'd still be a serf, plowing your land at the mercy of your master. So what we have is these rigged elections where our leaders are handpicked by some sort of elitist criminal cabal to do the bidding of them, and that is to keep checks on us. We'll harp on that a lot through the show tonight. So what the UK government is going to do is force all the internet service providers, just like they're going to do here in Canada, to keep information on you, your phone calls, your emails, your chats, everything, your whole data library of everything you've said and done, archived for a significant period of time. And they'll probably even go way further than that. It's like the Lenin School of Political Warfare: 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but they're always taking a step forward net. And in the public communications, that's what they intend to do. They have to keep an eye on us. We are the enemy to the New World Order. And most of the people who are potential enemies don't even know it. They can't even fathom the thought that the world is turned against them, that it's being taken over by a very nefarious plot working at the highest levels, who own and control virtually all our governments, all mass communications, all big business, the banksters, all the like, because they are slaves to the money. Because we're doing the Titanic thing this week, I don't have time to show a couple of short videos about the same length that go into this in great detail, so we'll have to wait till this is over. But one is by a former CIA agent who says, $300 million and I buy the United States. I can own all of Congress, the Senate, the courts, the president, the vice president, all the secretaries, $300 million. That's chump change to a lot of billionaires, especially when you look at the fact by having power and control over that, you can acquire trillions of dollars. Very good investment. We see in the news, newspaper readership is collapsing as people turn to alternative news for truthful reporting. Wow, who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it? People are catching on. These people are so bad. They just lie and lie and lie and lie, and they tell the biggest whoppers over and over and over again, can never, even once for a second, tell you the truth, or even anything close to the truth. They keep the lies going forever. We live in a collusive nexus of lies. The truth becomes the lie most repeated, and we accept that as the truth. And even when we come on to information that proves the past was a lie, or there is an error, we still harp on the lie, and we never accept or embrace the truth. Of course, one of the classics is the Titanic, because it's virtually impossible not to go over some of the most basic details and realize that it wasn't the Titanic, it's the Olympic. But still, as the anniversary approaches, the media will repeat the lie millions and millions and millions and millions of times over to all the bobbleheads who would just accept the lie. Never once changed the paradigm. I was quite surprised to see the National Post, and I don't know if I can reach it here. Let me see. If I was going to use a prop, this would have been it, and it just happens to be in the studio here, so I should have put it closer to me. But they have to compete now, the mainstream media, and start to tell conspiracies. Ooh. So here's the National Post yesterday. The Vatican and the missing girl, and the mafioso in the Vatican's tomb. So a long time ago, in 1983, a young girl went missing. Emanuela Orlandi, 15 years old. There's all kinds of allegations about Blackfriars Bridge, the Vatican Bank, Roberto Calvi, and the crooked dealings going on in the Vatican, and the fact that some suspect who was a major mafioso in Italy, Enrico De Pettis, leader of a Magliani gang, was shot dead by rival gangsters in 1990 and had his body entombed in the Vatican with deceased popes. You see the connection? Birds of a feather flock together, even in death. But the New World Order, their vassals, the mainstream press, have to compete with us now to some degree. And then we finished the little blog we started to talk about in last week's show about the old rugged cross, the new cell phone towers that are disguised at everything. A lot of them just aren't cell phone towers, they're also devices to capture what you say. We talked about this on a show many long years ago when they were first forecast, where, you know, your typical electrical pole in the street, your light pole, could be a data collection device. And you could be standing underneath talking to your friends and everything you say is recorded. Facial recognition, voice recognition, the Japanese are going into this whole hog. Some of the ones that, you know, they're even disguising stuff as trees, as we see in this picture. Putting stuff on all kinds of buildings that put out radioactive stuff that just makes you ill and sick. And then in some respect, it's kind of cute because this carries us back to the Ark of the Covenant, and was this God's communication device with us mere mortals here on the planet Earth? Could very, very well be. But we're in a lot of soup with this stuff. I'll show you a quick video on this about the election rigging that would just blow your mind.
Tonight, Maine's Republican Party announced Mitt Romney as the winner of their caucuses.
That winner is Mitt Romney.
What the headlines haven't told you is that what happened in Maine is the messiest caucus Republicans have had so far.
Certain residents in 3 of Maine's counties are being treated right now as if they do not exist.
The numbers that the state GOP in Maine are reporting are, according to caucus chairman, incorrect.
Kennebec County did vote as they were supposed to last week, but their vote total, as you see here, shows up as a 0 in the Republican Party's official results. Washington County postponed their caucuses on Saturday because of a snowstorm they expected to hit the area.
There's a lot more than what you said. The man who canceled it was a Mitt Romney supporter, and the snowstorm he predicted didn't happen.
Then there's Waldo County. Even though nearly all Waldo County towns held caucuses on February 4th, here's how most of Waldo County's votes look in the official Republican Party's results list. 0 votes.
Waldo County, where voters from 18 towns gathered for municipal caucuses. I talked with Matt McDonald, a pastor of a small community church in Belfast. He was nominated as the chairman of the Belfast caucus. The state instructed the chairman to not read any of the votes aloud, and instead to send them directly to Augusta. McDonald made a motion to have the votes read aloud at the caucus, and it passed unanimously.
The vote was 8 for Ron Paul, 7 for Rick Santorum, 5 for Mitt Romney, and there were 2 undecideds.
No results have been posted from the Belfast caucus.
The lady on the line said that she had received our tallies, our votes, but hadn't recorded them online yet, and she said Romney with 9, Rick Santorum with 5, Ron Paul with 2. Well, of course, those were not the right numbers, and I told her, and she said, well, those are the numbers we have.
You see, dozens of towns on the GOP site are listed as if no one voted, including in Waterville, Maine, home to 15,000 people.
We contacted the Maine Republican Party today to find out what the heck happened to all of Waldo County's votes. So far, we have not heard back. The margin of victory for Mitt Romney in Maine was 194 votes. That's called a hair.
On every occasion, the votes that were lost were Ron Paul votes. In one case, the votes were actually transferred from paper to electronics, and the lady doing the transfer was a Mitt Romney person.
Remember what the establishment said about Reagan? He's radical and out of touch and dangerous. It's the same thing the establishment now says about Ron Paul. What's so dangerous about him? He wants a return to the Constitution. And though the Constitution is our founding document and embodies our first principles of limited government, sound money, and personal freedom, we've drifted so far from it that a return to those principles would indeed mean substantive change to the government. The only danger Ron Paul represents is to the establishment that fears its own loss of power. We've drifted so far, drowned so deep in debt, lost so many of our rights, fought so many fruitless wars, that if we don't rock the boat now, we may end up sinking.
What's your plan for tonight?
Tell the truth. I've been in politics for 35 years. My cause has been the cause of liberty.
Okay, is that some video or is that some video? So we see clear out that the votes are being destroyed. A town of 15,000 people. Goose egg, 0. That's all you get. So I have to ask sometimes, what the hell is the matter with you? They're stealing all your rights. Ultimately, they'll steal you and kill you. That's the final nail that goes into your cross. As an American, you have the right to the Second Amendment. You should be having Second Amendment marches with your ballot box to where they count them. 15,000 armed men should be circling that building where that Mitt Romney piece of crap is tabulating ballots. A couple of drill sergeants from the Marine Corps should be outside screaming at the top of their lungs what the Constitution says. Just so her body shakes from the vibration. 15,000 rifle bolts, ka-chunk, ka-chunk, cocked over and over. Ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk. And then maybe bring a few blanks and squib loads for a firing squad demonstration. Just to let them know, you can count them and you can make a mistake, but I got Mr. Remington, and that's the ultimate whiteout. Do it right. Some states used to have sayings that go, don't tread on me. Dust them off a little bit. It's not a spectator sport, freedom. It's only free because somebody else did it for you for a long time. It's like the dysfunctional kid who's got a 10-foot pile of laundry in the hallway because mom's away for a little while, and he has absolutely no concept of the fact how the clothes disappeared before and magically reappeared in his closet. Just like your freedoms. They magically appeared somewhere because a whole pile of patriots you never know died and bled on the battlefield to give them to you. And they just appeared. And with the patriots away, there's just a big pile of feces that masquerades as a free country. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's like the biggest slave colony in creation. It's a terrible, terrible shame to see such a great experiment as the United States of America being turned into something where they use, Chairman Mao's axiom, it doesn't matter who casts the ballot, It only matters who counts the ballot. Nothing against Mitt Romney, but he's one of these patsies used by the New World Order. His Mormon Church baptized this week one of the famous individuals in history, Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler. Is that why your votes don't count? Because all the people at Mitt Romney's side are like the guy in Dr. Strangelove? Get off your fat asses and do something about it. Because if you don't, you'll never get a second chance. As you'll see as we progress, what happens when the exterminator comes. You'll either fight or you'll die. It's the only way out. These are little battles. You just have to stand up. The big battles will come later with the roundup. So one individual that we did a blog on is the execution of PC David Rathband. A whole bunch of little things pop up that just, even when this started to happen at the very beginning, that you just say, Manchurian Candidate. Something's going on here. This is just totally off the wall. This police constable in England ended up having an affair or a very close relationship with one of the survivors of the July 7th terrorist attack. That strikes me as very, very, very remote odds. You know, there's got to be 30-something million women in the UK, maybe 10 or 12 million in the vicinity of his age group. How does he come across this one? So seemingly after he was wounded in an execution-style setup, he's supposed to have made her acquaintance, or maybe he made her acquaintance before. Maybe he saw things on the inside of the dark arts and sciences that dictated that he should be killed. So an individual by the name of Raoul Moat, there's a guy you don't want to meet on a dark alley, built like a brick shed house, stronger than hell, mean and angry, like, you know, he's the guy who should be going after Mitt Romney supporters who count the ballots just to, you know, keep them honest. But fortunately, he was used for other purposes. Probably Mind Control 101, turned into the Manchurian assassin. One of the biggest ways they do Manchurian assassinations is they do the mass killing. So when they do the mass killing, they kill the target, and they kill a lot of other people around the target, and no one ever suspects that they were after one individual person. One of the classic examples was the Beltway sniper killing Linda Franklin, the woman who worked for the FBI and put in the infraguard system. So if we just killed her by herself, well then spotlights would be coming from 20 different directions to say it's because of her work with the FBI. But if she's killed by a random gunman in some sort of bizarre act with a whole bunch of other people that don't have anywhere near the significance she did, we just say it was just blind luck that she happened to be coming out of the Walmart store at the time the Beltway sniper was sighting in his rifle. And no one puts the pieces together. It's the same with 7-7. 7-7 on that bus, Giles Hart, the guy who was probably the most knowledgeable about the money transfers we talked about earlier with the Vatican Bank, was on the bus. So I'm a little different than a lot of other people. I went through all the names of the people who were killed to say what motive would anyone have to kill them. And I was really surprised with Giles Hart's background, knighted by Poland, in the Cold War, making sure the CIA money goes through the Vatican to get to the Solidarity Trade Union movement. Sure, that's a big story to tell, but dead men tell no tales. There's another picture of Raoul Moat in some homoerotic pose of some sort. And then another one that's completely off the wall where he's your typical family man. They did something to him. He was in prison for a long time. Probably had a lot of potential as a Manchurian of one face or another. One journalism professor at the BBC School of Journalism, picked up on it too. When this happened, he said, the media just went on a jihad mode. That's what I call it, the jihad mode. Because in those days, this is before hacking, so Rupert Murdoch's free to use all the cards in his deck. They just hang people in the media. And he picked up on it right away to say this is just like overkill by 1,000%. The way they're talking about this guy, they're making him into the biggest monster that ever existed in humankind. The manhunt was bigger and better than the gunpowder plot. Or is it manufactured by design to make you think and come to conclusions that they want you to come to? One is the fact that this whole affair isn't a personal vendetta so much where he's killing his ex-girlfriend or trying to kill his ex-girlfriend. She survived, and her new boyfriend, who was killed. The primary target may have been the constable, because they would know he was in the area coming to the scene. So Moat shot him twice in the face with a shotgun, and by miracle of miracles, he survived. He was blinded, but he survived. And then other things happened that just totally don't make any sense, because you'd never see this anywhere, but they put these pictures of the wounded constable in his hospital bed and blast them through the tabloids. Now I can well imagine if there was a police shooting here in Toronto tonight, and I went to the hospital to say that I want to take pictures of the wounded officer's body to put on a tabloid newspaper, I'm sure I'd be picking my teeth up off the ground. And my face would probably look like the good constables here. In any civilized society. So how do they get these pictures? How did this happen? Where is the breakdown between his mates, his colleagues, allowing someone to do this like this? He's blind and he's unconscious. Never seen anything like it. So that tells us this is the 7/7 crime scene. The bus blown up. And of course, like I say, I know God made me different, because this picture was flashed around the world, maybe seen by billions of people instead of hundreds of millions. No one asks any questions. No one pulls back the veil to look behind. But, you know, right away I'm attracted to the van beside the bus and the name on it. Am I the only one? I spent hours and hours archiving and looking at pictures of every different direction of the explosion. Looking at this vehicle, this is one of the best shots of it. When you blow it up, it says Kingstar. Kingstar Demolitions. Okay, we're not rocket scientists, but you just had a big explosion. There's a demolition truck next to the bus. 2 and 2 is still 4. Highly likely. So this liaison that the constable had, this lady here, Lisa French, was on the bus. And miracle of miracles, she survived. She had a couple of teeth knocked out, some contusions and bruises and all that sort of thing, but she survived. She was supposed to be several seats forward of the so-called terrorist on the bus. This blast even happened in Tavistock Square, where they do the mind control. The statue to Sigmund Freud is just around the corner. And then, of course, being a Murdoch production, Elizabeth Murdoch is married to Matthew Freund, a direct descendant of Sigmund. Lisa French worked for British Telecom. British Telecom owns unbelievable amounts of real estate underground in London. All the communications tunnels, the Cold War projects, World War II bombing projects. They could go anywhere underground. Sabotage any subway train. Move explosives, men, materiel, and equipment in and out of a crime scene without anyone knowing, because these are classified. Even a lot of the police might not even be aware of the tunnel tracks and where they go. You just disappear behind a door in a wall and reappear 5 miles distant, come out another wall. And no one ever knows what happened. They don't even think to ask. So we have to wonder to some degree, did she tell him something, show him something Is there a greater purpose to this? Because I think there is. I think they blew him away, hoping to kill him for the knowledge he possessed. He survived. Then they started a new jihad, where they started the tabloid stuff on this guy, following him around, taking his pictures. He's blind. He has no idea that they're taking his picture. Going to the bank with Lisa. A lot of the so-called material that upset his wife were text messages and phone calls. And we know now that Rupert Murdoch and Murder Incorporated completely control the phones in England and pretty much the world. He could send out any kind of false message anywhere, anytime, and just rub these people the wrong way 6 ways from Sunday. And be there to see how it all falls into place. So there's the, as they like to say, pre-9/11 world, and then there's the pre-hacking scandal world, and now the post-hacking scandal world. So now we have to take it as a given that anyone that's tabloided has been hacked, that they have complete control over all their communications medium. Did they drive this man to suicide? I don't think so. This is a picture of his family before all the great events, his wife, his children. His wife was in communication with him on the telephone, she thinks. Or a synthesized voice that is him. He says, or talks in a way that makes her think he's depressed, that he's going to die. He is a cop. She calls for help. By the time they got there, he's hung dead. And I find it hard to believe that they couldn't make it there in 5 minutes or less. So even if you were on the chair talking to her, kicking it out from under yourself, you might still have a pulse by the time they get there in 5 minutes. Unless they took an hour and went for coffee first because they want him to die. But I find that a little difficult to believe because he's one of the brothers. But it just seems, you know, you put in an emergency call and they find him dead that quick. I'm almost thinking he was dead before the call was made, or what was thought to be the call was made. Because in this modern matrix, you can duplicate so much. It is beyond belief. And he's not the only one, of course. Another death we've been looking into quite a lot was Gareth Williams from MI6. This is a picture of his funeral. And Gareth at the bottom. They did the media jihad on him too, so that's a dead giveaway that they're up to no good. This is another one pre-hacking. They made all kinds of bizarre allegations that his parents and his girlfriend did not support people who know him the best. The most direct, crucial evidence. They make up all kinds of stuff about him being gay, having women's clothes, going to all kinds of bizarre things, getting involved in bondage and this and that. And it sounds like it's all made up. They did the same thing with Chief Todd of Manchester Police. And then, of course, Gareth got his PhD in Manchester. Gareth cycled in the park where Chief Todd's body was found. Remote coincidences, but coincidences. But the same thing is we gauge it by what the media did. Jihad. They went after Chief Todd post-mortem after his death as if he was the gigolo of gigolos that ever existed on the planet Earth. And it really wasn't true. Yes, he had relationships with different women over a long, extended lifespan, but it wasn't wild sex orgies or anything like that. So they lied, but they always lie. You pay for their lies. You'll pay even more dearly for their lies. So seemingly, this poor guy is found in a sports bag, decomposing in his MI6 safe house yet. His employer, MI6, doesn't report him missing, even though he doesn't show up for work for about 8 days. Very nice of them. When the police do attend at his safe house, they find him locked in the sports bag, keys inside, lock on the outside. No way he could have done it himself. Somebody put him in there. And then for, this is like 20 months ago, for 20 months we get all kinds of crap and bull. And finally the media released one piece of information that I could follow and track down a little bit. They talk about this mystery woman here on the film set of a minor movie A woman who gave 3 names to the police. Now, wherever you go, lying to the police in an investigation is usually going to get you put behind bars. Canada, you would call that obstructing police, obstructing justice, or something along that lines. They're going to lock you up. End of story. You got a lot of time to figure out what your name is behind bars. They wanted to cover it up. As I said, she came from one of those elite rich families, and they didn't want to throw a little dirt on them. But the dirt that's already there is nothing compared to the fact that you knew somebody who got murdered in England. It's very deep. So she, her real name, Missa Guthrie, alias Misa Gusseri, or Elizabeth Guthrie, is the daughter of George Gordon Guthrie, a wealthy New York stockbroker. The family tree goes back to the steel magnate Henry Phipps, a business partner of Andrew Carnegie. Globalism at its roots. They invest their money with a company called Bessemer Trust. The Bush family do as well. Bernard Madoff worked for Bessemer Trust. All of a sudden, this is getting into be quite the little story. There's a flow chart of Bush's money going to everywhere, which you can see on our website, conspiracy-cafe.com. Call it The Tangled Weave, with a link to the article about the Tangled Weave. Miss Guthrie works for a secretive Middle Eastern oil and minerals company, but they don't specify that, so we can maybe allude it's Libya, maybe it was Iraq. Her uncle was a plastic surgeon. We know that Muammar had plastic surgery. Did he do some of the operations on him? Is it that deep? Did he give Uncle Muammar the new face? We have to ask these questions. And of course his son, Randolph Hobson Guthrie III, ends up being very well entrenched in the New World Order. You see, he was hawking copyright DVDs in China and sending them back to the United States. And this is a good story too, because as soon as I started working on this stuff, who's hacking on me but the Chinese? The alarms on my computer at home just go whoop, 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 whoop. And my friends from Beijing are, peeking in my windows. Got a few key words there that are upsetting the New World Order to some degree. So Randolph Hobson Guthrie was arrested before China and the United States had any type of agreement on these sort of things in a sting called Operation Sting for copyright infringement. He got in a fight with his girlfriend Julia that involved a knife where they stabbed each other and blood all over the floor. Nobody gets arrested, nothing happens. But copyright infringement, like they're on you like glue. So this chap, Ronald K. Noble, head of Interpol, testified before the House Committee on International Relations July 16, 2003, and he listed certain groups that were bootlegging DVDs that were supporting, get this, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, Chechen separatists, ethnic Albanian extremists, and paramilitaries in Northern Ireland. Like, that's almost everybody. So they had to go after these guys. So they set up the sting, they bust him, he appears before a Chinese court, he's sentenced to prison, and then, like all good moles or special agents, he's let out after a couple of months. He doesn't serve his whole sentence. He was supposed to be extradited back to the United States to serve, 1,001 years in prison in the United States for copyright infringement, but it appears nothing happened to him there for some reason. Because you don't beat your own dog. And then he just kind of falls off the radar screen. So my question is, well, his sister had a business in London. Did he go to London too? Is he the mysterious third person who was in the flat with Gareth and Missa? Is he part of the equation in there? Were they funneling money to Al-Qaeda? Or better yet, to the Bush family? Or money to terrorists from the Bush family? And that Gareth found out because he's a computer genius? Probably an honest guy. And it's just one of those things that it's a little too hard to swallow, too hard to take. And they start to worry about you. So they do what they do best. Kill you. And there's Gareth being hauled out to the meat wagon after the so-called sex game, which probably never happened anyway. To add insult to injury, I even wonder about this red bag that his body was put in. It's called the North Face, very common company. I just passed several of them down on the street, people wearing North Face clothes. But, you wonder. Chief Todd fell off an embankment, or basically a cliff. Mount Snowdon is the biggest mountain in Britain. Did he fall off the North Face? Because the same thing happened with him. His cell phone was compromised. Messages were going out back and forth to his friends on the police force. There's like two different guys. One's like crazy and suicidal, and the other one's calm and relaxed and everything's okay. Because one of them's Chief Todd, and one of them's Murdoch, Murder Incorporated. It's not too hard to figure out. They're everywhere. Doing almost anything and everything. Because nobody's checking up on them. The whore media are just whores. And then on a sidebar in some of the research I do, you got to read everything in great detail and go through it. I come across this poor young fella, Boris, a German hacker, member of the Chaos Computer Club, with the pseudonym of Tron. Tron was a Disney movie about computer programs that appear in the likeness of humans. Who created them? Their chief weapon is an identity disk. There's a master control program, an artificial intelligence that seeks to control all programs. Sounds like the New World Order taking over the world. They're resistant to change. The resistors are resistant to change, so they're forced to play martial games and are destroyed. Young Boris was destroyed sometime in mid-October, between the 17th and 22nd of October 1998. He was found dead in a park in Berlin, Germany. Apparent suicide, hung, but his feet were still on the ground. Now that's a good one. Of course, it's suicide, not homicide, right? Because they own all the cops anyway. But where this young man is a genius, I'll have to write this up in a blog. He'd be the guy who would come up with something like Apple. It's just he didn't have the brakes, because I guess he's a good guy. He wouldn't sell his soul for the stuff. But what he did is, he invented ways to breach the security in all the phone cards and produced working clones of the phones. He was sentenced to 15 months in jail for that reverse engineering. His parents didn't even want his name on Wikipedia. He interned with a company developing electronic security systems. His diploma thesis, Cryptophon, is just a work of brilliance. He also was able to get into those TV satellite encryption devices, break them open, and get you free TV. He was the master of that as well. And then in another article, we find that Murdoch's chief of security, a former commander, head of the intelligence unit for the Metropolitan Police, Ray Adams, was involved in just like running the Gestapo for Murdoch's organization. And one of the big things that they worked on doing is they tried to recruit Boris. And he turned them down. So it appears Boris was like the beginning of the technological advances that Murdoch would use for his evil empire. And of course, by turning them down, several months later, he was executed in that park because Tron resisted. So we have to wonder, is this like the very outset of it? Because what's in the news today is News Corp muscling in on other cable companies and other television companies by breaking their encryptions and allowing people to take their stuff for free so that the revenues fall off on these companies and they get into trouble. And then Murdoch comes along and saves the day. He buys the companies. Master criminal. Master criminal. So if you think just poor Madeleine McCann is at the top of the Murdoch kill list, I wouldn't be the slightest bit surprised that it goes far deeper. Gordon Duff, a well-respected alternative media writer, put together a piece called America's Murdoch Weakness, Espionage and Bribery on the Surface, What is Beneath, where he alludes to the fact that Murdoch and all his companies are basically waging a psychological operation on the United States and pretty much all the other countries they work in to manufacture data for your brain so that you just go with the flow. He alleges that they go even deeper than this. Part of it was on a BBC show called Panorama. He even suggests that they're a front for the Mossad to do the dirty work for Israel's intelligence agencies to get the Western countries to commit themselves to war by using the propaganda and having the dirty pictures of all our leaders so that they'll acquiesce, or the bank account numbers where they funnel their money or whatever other sordid things they get into. He makes specific mention of Metropolitan Police Commander Ray Adams engaging in a range of illegal activities, including sabotaging rivals, unlawfully obtaining telephone records, and fabricating legal actions. Murdoch has been spying, blackmailing, and bribing across Britain. And as we've said before, he picks the prime ministers. His media builds them up. They go on those jihads to say, he's bad, he's good. He's bad, he's good. And people just fall for it. But there's very little going out in the United States in mainstream media to burn his ass. And that's a shame. Wiretapping the phones of Congress, state officials, computer hacking, wiretapping, assassinations, poisoning. Can you believe this? I can. And then he even gets into 9/11. Talks about, for anyone who thinks an aircraft hit the Pentagon, as we all know, the hole's too small. The attack teams of Israelis, Mossad agents with guns captured in and around New York, later released. The bin Laden family. Saying that the Manhattan building was hit with 4 small nuclear explosions as we played a Russian scientist extolling those virtues, leaving many, many people dying. The insurance frauds. The wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, the killing of thousands and thousands of Americans. Wire transfers of what he tables as $31.1 trillion. Mucking up the derivatives. It's just unbelievable. So he says they own them all. 9/11 was a bank robbery that needed a diversion. The Twin Towers were the diversion. And one thing I like about his article, he used the same picture of Rudy Giuliani that I posted on my blog, so I wonder if he read it and took it further, where Giuliani's dancing as a chorus girl, suitably dressed in drag. I thought that one was kind of cute. I was too busy checking out the shows as opposed to guarding the city. And then bringing this guy, Bernie Carrick, in as the police commissioner, almost appointed the head of Homeland Security, a despicable criminal at the highest levels, and a good friend of one of our cabinet ministers and former police commissioners here in Canada, Julie Fantino. Birds of a feather flock together. So this huge empire was basically taking over the United States, taking over the world, getting us to fight each other, getting us to hate each other, getting us to destroy each other for their personal profit. And nobody's got the guts to say anything about it. Killing a bright young man like Boris, killing cops, killing spies, killing innocent people in drone raids. stealing all your money, leaving you helpless and prostrate, taking away your jobs, taking away all your liberty, and laughing at you. And you haven't even got the guts to kick them in the keister. It's terrible. Spy chiefs issue warning that a Russian friend of Vanessa Redgrave is the target of another murder plot. Exile Ahmed Zakayev, friend of Vanessa Redgrave, is on the target list. So usually they just let them get killed. This is kind of surprising that they'd come up and say that this is going to happen. This guy was a politician in Chechnya of one of the separatist states. So the guy they accuse of being the potential killer gets a code name called E1. He was originally let into Britain, left, now he wanted to come back, and then they said you're a threat and a danger, and they don't let him back. They got him locked up. He's going through an immigration hearing and trial. But the funny thing is, even if he was, and you wanted to catch him in the act, usually a lot of times you let the so-called perp loose, follow him, find out who his contacts are, track him, investigate him, break the crime open and arrest a whole bunch of them. For some strange reason, they don't want nothing to do with this guy. Probably because they know all about him, because he worked for British intelligence all the time, and that's where he fled to anyway. Mr. Putin came up with a new zombie gun. The Russian military-industrial complex has come up with an electromagnetic radiation device similar to something found in microwave ovens that they're going to use to develop for taking care of business, as they say in the motorcycle gangs. So this is a dangerous type of affair we're getting into, something the Americans are setting the standard on. It's just like everything goes by assassination. Kill them all, let God sort it out. No rights, no courts, no trials, no nothing, November. Very, very nasty state of affairs. And that's one of the biggest problems I had with Mr. Bush and a lot of the things he did, is the whole thing is for the greater police state. And one of the big things we're coming on to is the London Olympics. This is the greater police state. We told you before that the Munich massacre that happened of the Israeli athletes was probably staged. They bring this on as the Hegelian dialectic, create a crisis, propose a solution, so that we can have a greater and better police state. Like every Olympics is getting like more crazy as we go on. So even the Olympics after the Munich massacre wasn't anywhere near as crazy as the ones that go on now. They're prepared for like almost everything. Invasions from space, any kind of disease, this, that. Like it's just like, it's so bizarre. It doesn't, like, there's got to be something in the DSM manuals about paranoia to say that you're so effing paranoid that you should be locked up. I like this image. I don't know if it's an official one or not, but we see a lot of things here. The rising sun flag, almost from the Japanese fascist state. All the pyramids, they're there all the time. But the big one is the fist. It's like the communist fist. Very prevalent. Holding the torch, the flames coming out, flames over the stadium. Is that where they blow up the nuclear device they put inside? Is that what it's symbolic for? But it was just a cute logo, and I didn't want to steal somebody else's that goes around with an article called the Olympic Prison City Rollout. Because basically that's what they're making, a prison planet, a prison city, getting us trained to accept our slavery. So I write in here, it's like the child molester coming up with the car, offering you the candy. What did your parents say? Don't take candy from strangers. What's the first thing you do when you become an adult? Oh, here's the Olympics. Take the candy. Well, they're taking you for a one-way ride. They're going to pull your pants down. Give it to you. You don't take the candy, because you don't know who these people are and you don't know what it stands for. Most of what's around the Olympics is just satanic, pagan religious practices. If it was just simple sports where people go to a sports field and do their stuff, okay, but they've turned this into such a circus that if you can't see this for what it is, well, you almost deserve to get trapped. This picture was the one that blew me away, is the fact the police have made their portable wall to put across the blocks in London to keep you out, to ghettoize you. And what's ironic about this picture is in the background is Parliament, the home of we the people. The culmination of the English Civil Wars to wrest power from the aristocracy. So it's symbolic that that's been blocked. The symbolism there, because I read about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising I was talking about. This is the wall that they built in the Warsaw Ghetto to keep the Jews in. Looks the same. Looks like history's repeating itself, because those who don't know their history are condemned to repeat it. This is a picture of the Germans shaking down the Jews. Papers, papers please. And then we go back to England again in the modern era. There they are. Everybody's up against the wall. Shakedown. You live in a free and democratic country. We don't need a warrant. We don't need anything. We just shake you down. We don't like the color of your skin as opposed to your religion, because all these guys just happen to be black. So we shake you down. The other great wall, the Berlin Wall, that separated east from west. Good guys and bad guys. Or were they all bad guys, just vying for control of the planet Earth? Everyone rejoiced when they took down that wall except me. I'm a very rare individual. Very difficult to get along with. So I didn't buy it. Didn't buy it at all. And the reason I didn't buy it is because I realized that there's an invisible hand. There is a new world order. There is a shadow government. And the shadow government is no longer afraid of the other side. That means they're together. They made a union. They made a pact. They don't need the wall anymore. So they put on a good show. Everybody comes around, they tear down the wall. They think they're free. It's like that classic saying goes, there's no greater slave than the one who thinks he's free. There you are, there's your illusion, you're free. Everything's okay, go back to sleep. Go to the Olympics. Watch TV so it can watch you back. Everything's okay. Don't worry. And everybody goes back to sleep. Two great sayings came out from President Kennedy. Ich bin ein Berliner. He was there in Berlin. There's links there on that blog. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall, Ronald Reagan said. Another famous saying, another famous president. So we have all this freedom. And this is the freedom we get. We get these police marching down the street, just like the SS in the old days, keeping us as slaves. This has all been a giant psyops to train us to accept our slavery, because for that candy, the Olympics, we'll let them put the wall back. And we've gone full circle. We tore down the wall, we thought we were free. We're so free we can put another wall back up and take the shakes down from the Gestapo. Because the New World Order has control of the planet now. There is no escape. The new wall is gravity. You can't get off. That's the wall. We're stuck here. So that's why we have to win this struggle, because we can't escape. And of course, the way to win that struggle is, I just take the classic formula for the escape velocity to overcome gravity. And we change the variables a little bit. The escape velocity is the speed of thought. G can be for George. So George's way to escape the mess is increase the velocity of the thought and put up more R resistance to the lies. And guess what? You find the escape velocity and you're free, even though we're still on the planet Earth. We didn't fall for it. We say no. No to the spectacles. Bread and circuses goes back all the way to ancient Rome. No big deal. One article that came along, ever wonder why there's a big push to get GPS readings at your front door? This is one I didn't hear about. This one should send shivers down your spine. So people who look like census takers go to the most remote places in the United States with GPS and record all the coordinates around properties in the middle of nowhere. Then enter onto the properties and specifically record the GPS coordinates of their doors. They were confronted by one individual, and he was wise enough to throw them out. But that still doesn't mean they didn't come back later or do it again some other time. But they're that horny to know where you are. There's only one reason for it. They have plans Lots of plans. And those plans don't include you. So as Smokey the Bear used to say, learn not to burn. We use the same thing. Learn not to burn. Because the ultimate trip is out the chimney when they burn your body. So don't burn. Fight back. It's the only way to do it. Let's do a little economy one, I guess. Let's get into the Brics summit that was in Africa. Instead of listening to me talk, we'll listen to these guys. They're pretty sharp.
Wrapped up now in India, creating an alternative global lender and stepping away from the dollar as a reserve currency, all among the main objectives. In New Delhi is RT's Priya Sridhar.
The leaders from the 5 leading emerging economies in the world, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are all here in New Delhi for the 4th annual Brics summit. Russian President Dmitry Medvedev held a bilateral meeting with the Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. There have been a lot of things on the agenda. One of the main themes of this year's summit is how these growing economic powers are also starting to have more political clout on major international issues like Syria. And again, we saw Russia and China saying that they back a ceasefire in Syria. They want peace in Syria, but they don't expect President Assad to step down. They don't want him to step down, like many of the Western leaders have said. Let's take a listen to what the Russian president had to say.
One of the priorities for Brics for the years to come should be the strengthening and key role of the UN Security Council in maintaining international peace and security, and also ensuring that the UN is not used as a cover for regime change and unilateral actions to resolve conflict situations.
And that was another thing that all of these 5 leaders talked about, reforming the United Nations. Another point that everyone was talking about was Iran and how sanctions are not going to work on Iran. These 5 countries are expected in the next 8 years to make up 50% of the global GDP. Even earlier this year, all of the Brics countries were discussing potentially bailing out Europe from its financial crisis. One of the major things on the agenda was talking about a potential Brics basket currency that could serve as an alternative to the American dollar or the euro. Today, all the 5 leaders signed an agreement to actually give out loans in their local currencies, which is another move that they're thinking about, moving away from the dollar and moving away from the euro. Another huge thing on the agenda here in Delhi was the idea of a joint Brics bank that could serve as an alternative to the Western-led traditional financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank.
And just a bit earlier here on the programme on RT, I spoke to Dr. Sriram Chawlia, Vice Dean at the Jindal School of International Affairs. He believes institutions like the IMF and the World Bank have frankly outlived their usefulness.
The problem with vying for some kind of crumbs from the high table is that it still depends upon the mercy and the munificence of the former superpowers who are now just great powers. The point is, in a multipolar world, I think it's better to launch your own initiatives and to show that you have the initiative to build your own institutions rather than to beg for a few more voting shares and a few more places in the managerial or the boards of the Bretton Woods institutions, because the Bretton Woods institutions I don't think can be reformed from within. They have failed, so therefore it's better to either abolish it or to replace it with a new institution. So this is where I think the Brics Development Bank comes in. This summit here in Delhi, they have really shown that they have the capability to forge ahead with new plans, new ideas and new institutions in order to govern the planet with a new ideology and a completely new functional basis for organizing economic life on the planet.
Okay, so we see the economic hitman is being put out of business. But it's something I've said many, many times before. There's a law of unintended consequences. For many, many years, the economic hitman has been exploiting and taking advantage of other countries under the auspices of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which were supposed to be set up as benevolent bankers to help developing nations. So they hook them with debt, just like the drug dealer hooks their victims with narcotics, so that you always have to come back for the fix and become their slave. It's a brilliant strategy, but it's just evil. I know when I first came across studies on the World Bank and what they do, if you're really benevolent, if you're really kind, if you're really out there to help somebody, you give them the loans in their own currency. Or even better yet, you give them the loans in American dollars and let them pay it back in their own currency. And then they never have a giant debt burden, because whatever happens, it's charity, right? It's money that you're ready to write off to help people. So giving US dollars and say, okay, pay back in Thai baht or something like that is fine. Then these people will never be debt slaves. If they prosper, fine. We'll get our money back. If they don't prosper, well, we won't get as much back, but we're not going to drown them. And that's what the whole objective lesson of charity should be, that we don't drown you. And then these people would like us as opposed to hate us. So now they've built a new system, or they're about to build a new system, which could fundamentally destroy the system we live in. That's payback time. There was a big plane crash in Russia. Actually, it was a smaller plane, but a plane crash in Russia. And that's one of the things that, you know, we have to work on very, very quickly here, because we're in another country, another language, another situation. This is the images of this crash in Siberia. It's a European plane that went down. Just took off from the airport, had to turn around, make an emergency landing, come back, trailing smoke, on fire. And then there's the classic witness statement of, there's a big bang, they heard a bang, it exploded. Then of course the media goes right away, well, they didn't de-ice. How does not de-icing start a fire? How does it make an explosion? Well, those little details are left out. They just didn't de-ice. So as we dig into the crash, Agent 99 works really hard to get me some names of the victims. One of them was Nikolai Medvedev, no relation to the Russian leader, I hope. But it turns out he's an executive, or was an executive, of a very lucrative Russian oil firm. And he was killed, along with 5 other employees of that oil company, and 2 other employees of another oil company. So his is a crossword puzzle delight. Surgut Neftegas. One of the big players in that company is a guy named Vladimir Bogdanov, one of the richest men in Russia, a billionaire. And one of the things that come up in this is there's new reporting laws, like everybody has to get into like the global system of some sort. They call it a game changer in the media. There's speculation that Citigroup says this company holds $28 billion in cash. That's enough to kill somebody over. But to come up with these international reporting standards, they don't want to do it. They don't want to talk about where the money goes or how it goes or who gets it. It's all supposed to be a big secret. And I would get the feeling that the individuals killed in this plane crash knew just a little too much. These companies are also in hostile takeovers with other companies. This Russian company is working with an Austrian company called OMV to take over a Hungarian oil refining business. It's a brutal takeover. So brutal, even the Austrian CEO of OMV was brought up on all kinds of charges. Can't get more brutal than that when they take out one of these people. So those are some of the things that were behind the crash. Why there's the bang. It's just the classic explosion on the airplane. And of course we had another incident in the United States, another school shooting. So seemingly some guy with a whack job name, 1L Go, goes to a Christian college in Oakland, California, with a gun and opens fire on people. Kills many, wounds many, in the classic nut bar scenario. These poor people are completely helpless. there's, virtually no way that any of them would think tactically or have any ability to resist. That's what makes it so sad. One of the women killed was a young mother with a 4-year-old child. Just good, decent people gunned down. The media all of a sudden gets into the jihad mode to say, well, when he was at the school, they teased him. And this is like payback time for the abuses he took because he didn't speak English too well. And somehow it just doesn't jive, because that's why you're going to the special school for special needs for Koreans who probably all don't speak English too well and need a little extra help to get over the hump. So I would find it hard to believe that other students would be so cruel and critical to tease you and brutalize you for 2 reasons. One is because you're all from someplace else and English is another language, so you're all not going to have mastery of the language. And the other thing, it's a Christian school. So why would you be doing stuff like that at a Christian school? At a Christian school, you'd be saying, well, we all get together and pray for each other and work with each other and try to make it all better for everyone as a collective. If they weren't doing that, that's a terrible thing to be a Christian and say that you don't do that. I found many people who came from other countries who didn't have mastery or knowledge of circumstances that are around them, and I helped them out. I remember working a lot with a chap I worked with from Pakistan who just wanted to really brush up on his English, and when we were on night shift, that's all we'd do is help him read better. I'd bring in some books of a low high school level or something to help him with his reading and studying so that he could master the language. He'd write little stories and essays, and I'd help him along, because that's what being a Christian's all about. You don't laugh at him or tease him or mock him or anything like that. You build him up. So if that's true, they were really deficient at that school. That shouldn't happen, especially at a Christian school. From the conspiracy end of the world, we find out his brother was an active duty sergeant in the U.S. Army, Special Forces, killed in a car accident in Virginia on March 8th, 2011. We also find out that one L. Go, that's got to be another name because his brother doesn't have the same name, so they must have made that one up for him. He lived in Virginia for 10 years in spite of the fact he had an address in California where there are some of those mind-bender schools. As soon as we bring in the Virginia equation, we're already starting to wonder, Virginia Tech, is one L. Go, was he the backup shooter for Virginia Tech or something? The substitute, the understudy in case Tu-Gun Cho couldn't make it? Released from his Manchurian assignment, let go? But he's always got that twitch from his MK Ultra training. And maybe the administrator he's hunting down used the control word to set him off. So he just completes his mission. And they didn't shut him down properly. Or maybe they didn't let it happen accidentally. Maybe it was on purpose because Obama's got to make a move on gun control. And the Zimmerman story just isn't coming out too well. People are figuring it out that it's a wild card being played by the administration to divide us, to conquer us, to build that wall between the races so we fight it out and hate each other, to take that candy of manipulation with the media shouting, "Jihad! Jihad! Jihad!" But more and more people are figuring that out, and they're not jumping to that drummer anymore, saying it's a fraud. I'm not going to hate black people because of that. Black people are saying I'm not going to hate white people because of that. I'm pointing my finger back at you, Obama, and say, what the hell are you trying to do? Take over the world, of course, but he won't say that because that's the truth. So when I look at this picture of the brother, Soo-Won Ko, 31, killed in this car accident on Interstate 77 in Virginia and Carroll County. He drove into this giant boulder that just fell off the side of a mountain face. This highway is 3 lanes wide. And that's one big ass boulder. And to understand, the speed of gravity was 32 feet per second when I went to school. So if that fell even a small distance, like that puppy's cooking and it's carrying a lot of energy behind it. And then you look at the sharp edges on that boulder, and I'm looking for the holes in the highway. Like, what's the highway made out of? Tungsten steel? How come the boulder didn't compress into the concrete? Or even worse, asphalt. Asphalt's very soft. There should be some like big holes in the asphalt where that boulder sunk in with those sharp edges. But it's not there. And there's some people who said in the area, said they've been, including the sergeant from the state police, said you've never seen a boulder that big come down like that. They're always much smaller. It's the first time it's been that big. So what does that tell us? Somebody left the boulder in the road? I'm thinking that's what it tells us. And this was an assassination attempt. Successful. So they killed the brother. Why? Because, remember, Two Gun Cho had lots of pictures taken in uniform too, when he was in the reserves of the military. One algo might have been the understudy. Just my idea of what could be. Well, I guess we should get into the Titanic, because we're coming closer to the anniversary. We're not going to partake of the lie. We're not going to tell you over and over and over again the fairy tale that this is the Titanic. This is the Olympic. This documentary is one of the best I've ever seen on it. I can watch it again and again and again and still be enchanted. And this is part 4, why they sunk the Titanic.
The fourth officer, Joseph Groves Boxall, to work out a position.
Close enough not to make any...
It is clear from the records that Titanic's navigator worked out a position that was 12 miles away from where they actually were. This was to prove a fatal mistake. We know he was 12 miles out in his calculations because of the actual location of the wreck. The position that Boxall gave would have put the Titanic within sight of the Californian. Was that where he thought he should have been? For some reason, Captain Smith ordered the Titanic to move half speed ahead for another 5 minutes before stopping the engines again for the last time. Maybe he was heading towards the ship whose lights could just be made out on the horizon, expecting it to be the Californian. Several survivors mentioned the sighting of a ship about 5 or 6 miles from the Titanic. The Titanic could easily have steamed there, yet Smith was content to assume the ship would sail over to him, because he believed it was the Californian. At this point, let's examine what's happened so far. A stricken ocean liner is dead in the water. A rescue ship, the Californian, is standing by. Messages have been sent to Captain Smith from the Californian, stating exactly where she is waiting. Captain Smith can see a stationary ship on the horizon, and having received inaccurate information from 4th Officer Boxall as to his position, he assumes it's the Californian and everything's going according to plan. At about midnight, the Titanic started sending up her distress rockets, red, white, and blue. Rockets could also be seen from the bridge of the Californian, and this was duly reported to Captain Lord. Captain Lord asked what colour the rockets were. In fact, over the next 2 hours, Lord repeatedly asked his officers about the colour of the rockets. Was he expecting to see red or blue signals? Very likely. But whether he was or not, the answer from the bridge was always the same. Only white rockets could be seen. He therefore, rightly, assumed that the rockets were not coming from the Titanic. Survivors reported that the rockets launched from the bridge of the Titanic soared up several hundred feet into the night sky, bursting with an ear-splitting report. The rockets from the ship that was visible from the Californian only went as high as the top of her mast, and even at 4 to 5 miles distant, the officers would have quite reasonably expected to hear a report. But they heard nothing. It seems most likely that the ship seen from the Californian was a wooden sailing bark called the Samson, conducting illegal seal fishing activities on the ice floes at the time. The white rockets she was firing, to mast height only, were intended to recall her small rowing boats. A few months after the disaster, the captain of the Samson said that he had also seen a large liner firing rockets and that he had not gone to investigate because of his own illegal activities. The Californian's apprentice, Gibson, later testified that he saw only 8 rockets fired from the ship, and all white. The Titanic had fired at least 18, possibly as many as 22, and had included red and blue. Titanic survivor Miss Edith Russell said the officers told them all, "Don't worry, the Californian will pick everybody up if you don't come back for breakfast." How could they possibly have known it was the Californian? It's hard to believe in such an emergency, but they were letting lifeboats go half full. They knew the ship was sinking, nobody could be that stupid. But they expected the ship on the horizon to come steaming over. But it was the wrong ship. The Californian was 19 miles away, where Captain Stanley Lord waited for coloured rockets. At around 1 a.m. it must finally have dawned on Captain Smith that the rescue upon which the survival of so many depended was not going to materialise. Now boats are being let go full and passengers are beginning to panic. As the senior surviving officer, much credence and publicity was given to the evidence of Second Officer Lightholler.
I did not leave the Titanic, sir. The Titanic left me.
He was evasive in response to pertinent questions at the American and British inquiries, out to protect first and foremost his own reputation and then that of the White Star Line. At the British inquiry, he claimed,
"The Titanic began her turn to port before the lookout rang down from the crow's nest."
How would he have known this? He said he was in his cabin at the time. Lightholler also said at the American inquiry,
"There was no mist 10 minutes before the ship struck a berg,"
flatly contradicting the evidence of the 2 lookouts. And how would he have known this if he was in his cabin? He also lied about the number of ice warnings received on the bridge, as if to suggest that the iceberg came as a surprise.
"I do not remember any ice warnings being posted on the bridge."
Lightholler, along with second radio operator Harold Bride and ship's baker Charles Joffin, all claimed that after getting off the Titanic, they stayed in the water for up to an hour.
"I was in the water for between half an hour and an hour before I climbed aboard the upturned collapsible. 20 of us spent most of the rest of that night balancing on the upturned boat, while I gave the orders. Lean left and lean right."
This is quite clearly not possible. We know that the sea temperature that night was between 2 and 3 degrees below freezing. Average life expectancy at that temperature between 3 and 4 minutes. This testimony would simply not stand up today. It is quite clearly fabrication. Just before 5:30 on that fateful morning, Captain Stanley Lord woke his radio operator, only to discover that the Titanic had already sunk. He set off at full steam for the wreck site, but of course he was too late. The Carpathia had already arrived and was picking up survivors. Notable amongst these was J. Bruce Ismay, who had slipped into a lifeboat at the last minute. For this he was to pay the price in public shame for the rest of his life. As the Carpathia steamed towards New York, Ismay was supposedly taken to the doctor's cabin and put under sedation. Even so, he managed to find time to send 3 separate telegrams to the White Star's New York office, urging them to hold the Cedric in New York Harbor so that the Titanic's surviving crew members could be taken straight back to Southampton. Hastily organized, the American inquiry failed to ask the right questions. Titanic surviving officers stonewalled, as did Ismay himself. Several experienced sea captains were called to give evidence regarding the wisdom of steaming at full speed through an ice field, but they all said the same thing. Maintaining full speed in the vicinity of ice was perfectly normal, and on the night in question, the icebergs could be seen at between 5 and 6 miles distant. It never occurred to anyone to ask the simple question, in that case, why did the Titanic hit an iceberg? When the surviving crew got back to England, they naturally expected to go straight home to their loved ones. Instead, they were all herded into a railway shed and held for nearly 24 hours before being made to sign pieces of paper. A lot of them were under the impression that they were signing the Official Secrets Act. Was someone trying to suppress something here? Some vital piece of information?
Remember what it is you've put your names to. If there's any talk of the ship being swapped in Belfast, or any stories of insurance fraud going on, then there will be 20 years of His Majesty's pleasure awaiting you and no job to come out to when it's over. So, think on this when you see your wives and sweethearts.
Ismay, Lightoller and the other surviving officers all came back to England on the steamship Adriatic. There can be little doubt as to the main subject of conversation on their voyage. They were all to be star witnesses in the forthcoming British inquiry.
Read all about it! Titanic says! Read all about it!
Now, it is unlikely that a fraud of such immense proportions could have been undertaken without the collusion of the authorities, notably the British government, as we shall see later when we look at the inquiry. In fact, it makes perfect sense for the government of the day, under Prime Minister Lord Asquith, to have colluded in a cover-up.
You'll never believe what they've just done.
How many?
I'm told 1,500. The position is simply this, Prime Minister. The White Star Line is on the verge of bankruptcy. Now, if White Star were forced to go into liquidation, La Holland and Poolfjord in Belfast would also be placed in a very precarious position, perhaps even forced to close down. Now, that means that 20,000 men will be laid off, not to mention the effect on all the subsidiary and dependent industries. Quite frankly, it is a political situation we cannot afford, Prime Minister.
A political situation they cannot afford. You get the feeling maybe there were talks like that in the White House after 9/11, that if the truth came out, the political circumstances are something we cannot afford. So because we didn't learn this lesson 100 years ago, we've had to live through it again and again and again because people won't accept the painful truths. It's a terrible shame, terrible disaster. The truth behind the Olympic is exactly the same scenario played out in many different versions through history. Again and again and again and again. And if you don't learn the trick, you're going to have to live through the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one might be global thermonuclear war. And there won't be anybody to run in the background and say, we got to cover this up, because we'll all be eating lamb in paradise. Vic Tays, our state security minister, the minister of the Gestapo to-be, was hospitalized quickly with the flu. Too bad, too sad, but considering what they're doing to us, I'll shed not even crocodile tears for these donuts. U.S. Defense Department announces a step towards the North American Union. Yes, the amigos met. And they're putting in more frameworks using the buzzwords that they can publish in mainstream media. Same kind of buzzwords that were released in the Wikipedia document where then Ambassador Paul Carlucci described the process in a 2005 email. Process of gradualism, incrementation, not to frighten American citizens and Canadian citizens and Mexican citizens into realizing that their national sovereignty was being threatened. Our nations are all like family, which is true, but family who don't live together, don't sleep in the same bed. One of my old Georgisms is, incremental fascism is hardly ever noticed and even extolled by the people it is to be applied to. They know incrementalization very, very well. Some of the agreements that came from the Prime Minister's office releases the North American Plan for Animal and Pandemic Influenza. Yes, so they have all kinds of great reports that you never get told about, building up on the 2007 North American Plan for Avian and Pandemic Influenza with the lessons of 2009 applied to create a bigger, better police state and force us into something we don't need. Then another one called SICA, North American Dialogue, the establishment of a Central American Integration System, SICA. What if they don't want to integrate? Oh yeah, that's right. No way out. The joint statement by North American leaders. And this is where you get all the buzzwords just laid out just so well. They don't tell you anything exactly about what they're doing. To advance the economic well-being, safety, and security of the United States, Mexico, and Canada, rooted in deep economic, historical, cultural, environmental, and societal ties. North American cooperation enhances our ability to face global challenges, compete in the international economy, and achieve greater prosperity. We reaffirm our commitment to further develop our thriving political and economic partnership with a consistent and strategic long-term vision. As progress on our common agenda directly benefits the peoples of our region. So the only thing that they even remotely came close to telling the truth in the beginning of this statement is long-term vision. Well, the long-term vision, of course, is the North American Union, which is a conspiracy theory that they won't tell you exists. And then the good stuff, our integration helps maximize our capabilities and makes our economies more innovative and competitive globally. Working together, we strive to ensure that North American economic cooperation fosters gains in productivity for all of our citizens, enhancing our respective national and bilateral efforts to achieve. And you got to work till you're 67, you old fart. Because we don't have enough money to let you retire at 65 anymore, and by the time you get to 67, you're going to have to work till you drop anyway. That's our prosperity. We're laying off at the federal government level thousands and thousands of people. They're laying off a couple of hundred teachers here in Toronto because they just can't afford it anymore. See, that's our prosperity. We're working to all this prosperity. It's all a lie. Hitler's speechwriter must have done this one. He's probably baptized into the Mormon faith too. We have launched the U.S.-Mexico High-Level Regulatory Cooperation Council, and the U.S.-Canada Regulatory Cooperation Council is what? And we have the Declaration Concerning 21st Century Border Management. See, a long time ago after a big war, you had the Declaration of Independence or something like that. Well, we have the Declaration Concerning the 21st Century Border Management. Beyond the Border Action Plan, well, we've heard about that one. That lets the Gestapo move either side of the border. So as I've said many, many times, it's kind of like Stephen Harper lost the War of 1812 for us by surrendering our sovereignty to the United States and allowing manifest destiny to run roughshod all over us because they got pictures of them naked somewhere, or they're just flat out bribing them. And they get into the Green Climate Fund. Well, I've never heard about that one. But they're going to meet again in Doha, Qatar. Talking about the pandemic that's coming our way. The Trans-Pacific Partnership. You can't go wrong. It's just absolutely amazing what they have for us. USS Enterprise is sailing slowly to the war zone. It's almost there, but we're just going ever so slowly. The good thing is Hillary Clinton, I heard on the news, was talking to the Iranians and maybe working some things out. Israeli soldiers are reportedly active in Iran, doing covert missions, possibly even in Iranian uniforms, which means they could be setting up a false flag. Russia has drawn the line in the sand on Syria, saying no. Russia's also pumping in arms and men and special forces into Syria as well, so we don't know exactly where they fit in the slaughter that's going on. May not be good. Price of gas is going up in southern Ontario and a lot of places. One of our writers here suggests that is more reflective of currency devaluation. It's one of the few things they can't cook the books on, because they cook the books on many things. Cult of the dead arrested in Mexico, ritually sacrificing young boys and a woman. Maybe it was timely for when the Pope arrived. One of Sarkozy's top men was found dead in a New York apartment. Richard Decoyne. Suspicious circumstances the NYPD are looking into. Private companies in the UK that work for the Department of Motor Vehicles are selling the databases to criminals and anybody else who wants them. Genetically modified mosquitoes are being released. Maybe a good thing. 650,000 people die from malaria. But then again, another mosquito may take up the task and continue where they left off. One of the other things that I find very, very bizarre is, like I said in one of the postings, I have to work on this a little bit, but there's a common denominator starting to show up in many of these stories. This was one of them, because one of the actresses who contracted malaria in Tanzania was working for a show called The X Factor. And I know you know, if you watched this show for a long time, we brought that up in the Norwegian shootings, that X Factor Mo just happened to be on the island. I thought, that's, hey, what are the odds? And then our police constable in England just happened to get on the X Factor show too. So we get 3 X Factors in big stories about things going on in the world. Small world, isn't it? Or is X Factor part of the Murdoch style of TV intelligence that manipulates every thought you have and every action you take, and maybe gets into like serious covert activities, as we implied with X Factor Mo and Anders Breivik in the shooting in Norway. Pink Slime, they're shutting the place down after public backlash. Pink Slime is some lower quality meats mixed with chemicals put into ground beef. Still 100% pure beef, but just kind of slimy. Yuck. You used to just put an egg in the beef and make it slimy like naturally. Canadian banks get part of the bailout money. Don't ask how that happens, but one of our big banksters is one of those guys who goes to Bilderberg meetings and stuff like that. So TD probably gets a share that way, and I'm sure a few of the others fit in as well. It's all a part of the raping of the public, the taxpayer, you. But see, you don't want to put money in alternative media, you want to put it into corporate media so they can take all your money and maybe kill you someday. It's a good deal for them. The Ontario government is kind of like working in secret to pass this bill called Bill 13, where they're going to force schools, especially Catholic schools, to support gay clubs or any places where they're renting facilities and all that kind of stuff. You have to teach this stuff. So a lot of Christians say, well, that's against our freedom of religion because we don't believe in this, so we shouldn't be teaching this. So they got to get into some of the other options here where, you know, the male, the female, those I understand. The transgendered, I'm figuring that out. The transsexual, yeah, okay. Then they came up with 2 other versions here that I'm still scratching my head over. Two-spirited and intersexed. So maybe I need to go for some of that extra training there for the two-spirited and the intersexed. So like if I got my imaginary friend, does that mean I'm two-spirited? Or, you know, I'm just at a loss for this one. But of course, you know, my member of parliament has duly briefed me on this, and all the crap I get in the mailbox that doesn't tell me anything except his name. I have absolutely no idea what the hell's going on in that place because I got a representative, right? He's not my representative. They're just stool pigeons for the New World Order. Boston loses its landmark case against man who recorded police brutality, as if that has to be going to the courts. You're a public servant. The public photographs you screwing around, breaking the law. That's evidence. You see, the whole concept of America is to be a republic. The whole process of being a republic means that everyone is subservient to the law, and that includes the city of Boston, the police, the Department of Homeland Security, and everybody else down the trail. And if you're screwing up and you're not doing things according to Hoyle, which starts with a document that goes, we the people, the Constitution, then you're breaking the law, the supreme law of the land. And we the people, that this is supposed to be built around, have every right to record these things. So remember, there was another case that went along with this. It's probably a video, and I don't have it with me. Maybe we'll show it another time if I dig it out again. But, you know, this guy they wanted to put in jail for like 75 years. Well, you might as well go on the Second Amendment march and start pulling the trigger, because you might only get 50. Like, is this insane or what? The guys just took a picture of people abusing the civil liberties of Americans, and they even have a special law against that now, violating people's constitutional rights. So you're collecting evidence of so-called authorities breaking the law, and that makes you a criminal? No. The government is we, the people. You exercising your lawful rights as a citizen, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong like that, unless, of course, you're making a Gestapo police state. Then there's something wrong with that. George Zimmerman's brother comes clean in this Florida shooting. It's just like I said. He was losing the fight, and he was going to lose control of the weapon. And he can't allow that to happen, so he resorted to deadly force. The governor of Indiana signs a bill, Senate Enrolled Act 1, Mitch Daniels, to allow citizens to use deadly force against police officers in violation of those constitutional rights and freedoms. So if they just feel like, hey, we're kicking this guy's door in because we feel like it, and we don't have any lawful justification in any way, shape, or form, and we're breaking the law 6 ways from Sunday, you can use force to resist that invasion of your home. It's that old British thing, as your home is your castle. It goes back a long time, like to the Magna Carta. So a lot of people are shitting bricks about this one in Indiana, saying it's like open season on cops, but there's just a defined set of rules. You get a warrant. Not that that means much, because most of the judges sign them blank anyway. So there is no check and balance over that. I've seen a lot of that happen. Google signs patents technology to track down background noise. So not only can they wire your house and listen to your phone and all the rest of this stuff, or go for voice recognition, face recognition, they're even checking the background noises. Well, they must be brave, because if I'm breaking wind in the background, I don't know what, maybe I'll get all kinds of emails to say, I'm going to get some kind of anti-flatulent instead of a penis enlarger or some kind of substitute Viagra that's probably really, cow manure in some kind of pill. So that could be a big change. 38 House members filtered government money to relatives and their employers. Hundreds and millions of dollars, about $150 million. Well, that just goes without saying, I guess. The bedrock of vaccination theory crumbles, according to this article. Journal Immunity deconstructs the entire vaccination theory. The body's natural immune systems, both innate and adaptive components, work together to ward off disease without the need of antibody-producing vaccines. Peer-reviewed article. Can't go wrong. Where you can go right is, you can come here to Conspiracy Cafe, here in Toronto. The point of the sword, the home of something completely different. If you can put in a few dollars to help us out to keep this going, it's a godsend. The lives we save will be our own. The freedoms we save will be our own. You got an envelope and a stamp, and you stick a check in there, it's going to go a long way. You click the donate button on our website, conspiracy-cafe.com, or here at that channel, and earmark a few pesos to come this way. We can do stuff to unseat the North American Union. We can restore the Constitution. We can put the Bill of Rights into schools to be taught, not the gay agenda. You are what you are. I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is indoctrination, mind control manipulation, especially on young and vulnerable people. They need to be more in a sanitized environment about that. They got the rest of their lives to learn about sex. They don't need to have it when they're 5 and 6 years old. That's going a little too far. They'll figure it out. You don't need an instruction book. Worked for everybody else. There are tough times ahead. This is the place where you're going to get answers. Anything you can do to help, help. Buy something on the Conspiracy Cafe website. John went to a great deal of trouble to get high quality, made in America products that you can buy and give your fellow citizens a job. A real job that pays real money, as opposed to getting something from China Mart. This is going to be a rough time. Who knows what's going to happen for the rest of the year? There's surprises that are just going to pop out of nowhere and knock you on your butt. But you're very well prepared, because at this show, we're teaching you how to think, not what to think. To look behind the curtain, to peel back the veneer, and look for that C word, conspiracy. It's everywhere. And when you find it, you see it for yourself. The team that's coming out of here is brighter, smarter than almost anything you can find anywhere. The ones who look at Murdoch's publications just probably go, and that's the complete extent of their vocabulary. Terrible thing. We're the one and only. There's nothing like it. That channel hosts us, gives us time to run. We love them, appreciate for what they've done for us. It's a hard uphill fight. Aaron's done a good job tonight producing this stuff. Hugh works hard at this station, so does Randy. They try to make alternative media something that you can take to the bank. You can allow them to get there by helping to finance this. If you've got anybody who would like to be a sponsor for this show or any of our other programs, that keeps us all alive too. In fact, even better. It'd be nice, the gun stores here or something like that to show us some of the finer techniques of sporting equipment. So if you know of anything like that, send it this way, and the boys would probably appreciate having a few sponsors, myself included. Anyway, we've taken up enough of your time. It is the Easter weekend if you celebrate. I don't. There's a lot of prostitution from ancient Rome about putting Christ's teachings and feelings into pagan holidays, and Estra was a Roman goddess. So I find that one hard to swallow. Christ went to Passover, went to synagogue, so kind of lean more to Christian Passover than Estra, the Roman goddess. But that's just me. You're free to do what you want to do, and this is the weekend to do it. So we thank you for coming out. We thank you for blessing this show. For those who've contributed in the past, I think you've given us a couple of good punches to knock out, and we're doing a lot with it. So we'll be here again, same that time, same that channel next week. Thanks for coming out.
I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.